Shigeru Yoshioka was an ugly loser who lost his job and his will to live after a girl framed him with false harassment accusations. However, when given the chance to go to another world, he sacrificed his appearance and his ability to touch girls in exchange for absolute power, turning him into a god. Shigeru had always been ugly, but he was never a bad person. He was just an ordinary office worker who didn't let his unattractive looks stop him from being an honest man and living life to the fullest. He treated everyone with respect and had a modest social life. But everything changed when a woman falsely accused him of harassment on a train. No one believed him simply because he was ugly, and the case quickly went to court. Shigeru pleaded guilty to pay a small fine and settle it quickly. However, his plan backfired. He was fired from his job for being officially labeled a harasser. Years later, the woman who accused him was arrested for running a scam. She hadn't even done it for money, she had deliberately targeted men she deemed ugly. Shigeru was furious, but he could do nothing due to the trauma from the incident. He lost his confidence and couldn't find work. His situation worsened over time, and Shigeru became a reclusive unemployed man. He drained his savings and even his parents' money until one day, he read an article about missing people in his area. He wished he could disappear too. While reading the comments, he found someone claiming to have visited another world. That person said they failed because they misallocated their stat points at the start and had to return to Earth at the cost of half their lifespan. Shigeru laughed, but he was desperate enough to follow the instructions left behind. He stood before a window with his hands raised. And when the clock struck 2, his laptop screen changed on its own, asking if he wanted to start a new life. Assuming it was just a virus, Shigeru played along and clicked continue. The next page showed that he would be 16 in his new life and could allocate points to his appearance. Having lived as an ugly man his whole life, Shigeru lowered his appearance stat from 5 to -255, granting him an enormous amount of extra stat points. Not only that, but he also discovered that the more negative traits he chose, the more points he gained. He immediately began inputting undesirable traits, reducing his income by 10,000%, losing 10% HP every time he touched a girl, and even setting a condition that losing his virginity would cost him his life. In return, the system granted him 100 trillion bonus stat points. But before he could distribute them, time ran out, and he was transported to another world. Upon waking, he found himself even uglier than before, and twice as heavy as the average American. Others soon arrived, and Shigeru felt ashamed seeing 2 girls in their underwear. A handsome man removed his shirt and gave it to one of the shivering girls, so Shigeru tried to be polite and do the same. However, the other girl refused, disgusted at the idea of wearing something worn by a fat, ugly man. The handsome man introduced himself as Seiji. The blonde girl didn't give her name, while the second girl called herself Seikka. All were supposedly 16, though they struggled to believe Shigeru was the same age. Seiji took charge, confirming they had all arrived the same way. While they talked, Shigeru searched the room, finding a gold coin in a drawer, but it vanished upon touch. Realizing his income penalty made money disappear, he shrugged it off. Soon, Seiji suggested they gather resources together. They found weapons, clothes, and some coins. The clothes magically adjusted to fit everyone, but when dividing the coins, they noticed one was missing. Shigeru realized he had taken it but let them keep the rest. Seikka, however, insisted Shigeru didn't deserve a share since he didn't help. Already annoyed by her spoiled attitude, Shigeru ignored her and asked Seiji if he could take an axe instead. Seikka objected, and even Seiji, who admitted to being selfish in his past life, said Shigeru should work on his issues too. They settled the weapon distribution with rock-paper-scissors, leaving Shigeru with only a wooden stick. Later, Seiji suggested a handshake to mark the start of their adventure, but Shigeru refused. He couldn't risk losing HP. After finding a map, they headed to the nearest town but were ambushed by goblins. Seiji swiftly killed one, but more appeared. He ordered the blonde girl to support him while Seikka prepared her bow. Shigeru was told to protect Seikka, except she was a complete beginner who couldn't even string her bow. As Shigeru assessed her, a goblin attacked from behind. He tried to strike it down but found himself shockingly weak. Confused, he realized he never distributed his 100 trillion stat points. Still, he managed to kill the goblin with his next hit. Suddenly, a status window appeared. He had jumped to level 32 from 1 kill due to a 10,000% XP boost. While the others allocated their points normally, Shigeru dumped 1 trillion points into every stat. His status window glitched, and golden light enveloped him. The system revealed his new class, Omnipotent God. Before he could process it, another goblin attacked, but its strikes dealt 0 damage. Testing his power, Shigeru flicked his fingers, sending the goblin flying into the stratosphere. No one noticed. Seikka, still struggling, cried over her uselessness. Taking pity, Shigeru pretended to be a bow fanatic and strung it for her in an instant. Grateful, she asked him to shoot an arrow. He activated a skill, lightning arrow, but instead of hitting a goblin, it summoned a thunder dragon that obliterated the entire horde. Seikka, impressed, believed his excuse about an archery club. She kept firing randomly, exhausting her arrows until Shigeru used a skill to replenish them. Eventually, they reached town. While the others rushed to eat, Shigeru stayed behind, sitting by a fountain. A cat approached, but he hesitated to pet it. What if it was female? Seikka suddenly appeared, startling him into falling into the water. She handed him a burger as thanks, but their fingers brushed, triggering a 58 trillion horsepower loss. Worse, Seikka thought he'd thrown her gift away on purpose. Using his past salesmanship skills, Shigeru saved face. I was shocked because you're too beautiful. Seikka, flattered, offered her own burger instead. Though it was a dirty trick, Shigeru accepted her gratitude. As he was eating the burger, Seiji and the blonde girl found them, and Shigeru decided to stay until he paid Seikka back for the burger. Shortly after, Seikka went to the store to buy some arrows since he was running out quickly. He kept asking the shopkeeper for more, claiming he was rich enough to pay for them. But the man said his quiver was already full. Shigeru was with him and wanted to help, but he couldn't reveal that he could make arrows anytime. Seikka then asked if Shigeru wasn't going to buy anything, but quickly answered his own question, realizing Shigeru had no money. After they left, Seiji and the blonde girl returned, having found a good inn to stay in for the night. Shigeru said he'd sleep in the park since he obviously had no money, but Seikka insisted on paying for his room. Shigeru tried to refuse, but Seikka played the woman card, asking if he really wouldn't let a girl pay for his stay. Before Shigeru could answer, Seikka grabbed his hand and dragged him along, though since she touched him through his clothes, he took no damage. That night, Shigeru thought he couldn't stay any longer, as he'd only grow more indebted to Seikka and the others. The next morning, Seiji and the others woke up to find cakes and delicious food waiting on the table. Shigeru asked them to help eat it since he couldn't finish it all, and they wondered how he got it without money. He explained he used a technique that made people want to give him things in return. In reality, he'd made arrows from branches and bartered them for food instead of money. Seikka scolded him, saying he didn't need to beg just because he was broke, she could always help. Shigeru felt he'd repaid his debt to her, so he didn't need to stay longer. After eating, Seiji pulled out a map and said they needed to start doing quests to earn money. He noted that the monsters they fought yesterday hadn't dropped any loot, so he planned to check a nearby cave. Just then, a rough-looking man named Kyushiru approached, offering to guide them. He introduced himself as a reincarnated person like them and handed out green discount cards for the inn, which Seikka eagerly took. Seiji remained wary, and Shigeru suspected Kyushiru was exploiting newcomers. Still, he let Seiji decide, and they hired him as a guide. Kyushiru led them to the cave, where goblins attacked. Seikka fired arrows wildly, missing every shot until Kyushiru told her to imagine each arrow was worth 1,000,000 yen, making her aim carefully. Shigeru was impressed by Kyushiru's guidance but remained cautious. Later, Kyushiru advised Shigeru to practice, but Shigeru said his staff skills weren't suitable yet. Kyushiru reassured him that staff skills were powerful, though Shigeru already knew, he'd once nearly wiped out a 200 km radius with his strongest move. At the cave's boss room, Kyushiru warned Seikka not to enter recklessly. They retreated for the day, and Kyushiru invited them to a newcomer party in a safe room. Shigeru detected sleeping pills in the drinks but stayed silent as Seiji accepted. Once everyone fell asleep, Kyushiru's thugs moved in to capture them. Shigeru pretended to sleep, ready to act. When Seiji was knocked down, he suddenly awakened a Super Saiyan-like transformation, vowing to make Kyushiru pay. Shigeru, intrigued, shielded him as Seiji unleashed his power, leaving their enemies in shock. Seiji suddenly shouted the name of his next attack, and his hand began to glow even brighter. He then charged toward Kyushiru but stopped just before punching his face. Kyushiru asked why he stopped, and Seiji replied that he wasn't the one who had the right to judge him, that was the jurisdiction of the country's legal system. Shigeru Yoshioka knew he could easily crush the bandits right now, but he wanted to give them a chance to repent for their sins and start anew. Shigeru was aware that this was an incredibly foolish move for someone trying to be a law-abiding good guy. Yet, he didn't try to stop Seiji. Suddenly, Kyushiru told Seiji that he had won. He dropped his weapon and knelt, accepting his punishment. And the naive Seiji believed him. He started walking away, warning Kyushiru that he wouldn't forgive him if he committed crimes again. Shigeru didn't warn him this time, even though he knew Seiji was making the worst mistake by turning his back on an enemy. Seizing the opportunity, Kyushiru lunged at Seiji, but Shigeru tripped him with a rolling technique. The bandits cursed Shigeru and began kicking him, but their attacks did no damage. Shigeru casually picked his nose and flicked a booger at the wall, causing a massive explosion. While everyone stared in shock at the shattered wall, Shigeru quietly guided Seiji's glowing fist toward it to make them believe Seiji had done it. However, the problem was that even Seiji himself didn't believe it, so Shigeru decided to escalate his act. He claimed he clearly saw Seiji perform his ultimate move, and a white eagle descended from heaven to destroy the wall. The bandits completely bought the story before Seiji himself was even convinced. They fell to their knees, realizing they couldn't win. Kyushiru wept, tears and snot streaming down his face, swearing he'd never do evil again. Shigeru realized this wasn't enough punishment and ordered the bandits to line up. They obeyed immediately, and then Shigeru told Seiji to strike them with his special attack. Seiji hesitated, not wanting to punish those who had already admitted defeat. The bandits were terrified, thinking they'd die if hit. So, Shigeru compromised, telling Seiji to slap the bastards with his fist of justice so they'd understand others' pain. He convinced Seiji that only he could guide them to righteousness through the power of love. He reminded Seiji that he claimed his glowing fist could pierce all evil. If the bandits were still faking, they'd be obliterated by his slap. But if they truly repented, they'd be unharmed. To his surprise, Seiji reverted to his normal form, saying that if he wanted to change the bandits' hearts through love, he couldn't do it in his anger-fueled Super Saiyan state. The bandits couldn't believe anyone could be this stupid, but it worked in their favor. Seiji cried as he slapped them with love, and the bandits thanked him for giving them a chance after each strike. Once everyone had been slapped, Shigeru tied up the bandits while Seiji escorted the girls to safety. However, he was too exhausted and passed out. The bandits suddenly saw an opportunity to turn the tables and tried bribing Shigeru to join them. They promised to bring him willing women despite his ugly face and even offered extra money. But Shigeru made it clear that while he might be ugly, he wasn't a scoundrel. He simply broke his handcuffs to intimidate them and told them Seiji was even stronger than him. The bandits could only curse him for refusing their offer, but Shigeru ignored them. Soon, Kyushiru and his gang were handed over to the local authorities, and Shigeru's group received a hefty bounty. The girls were thrilled at the sight of so much money, and Seiji suggested splitting it. Seikka argued that since they were unconscious, they didn't deserve a share. Seiji should take it since he defeated the bandits. When asked about Shigeru, Seiji said he was even braver, enduring all the hits to keep them safe. The girls declared Shigeru the mission's MVP, deserving the largest share. Seiji agreed, but Shigeru refused, knowing his cut would shrink to just 1% of the total. So, he told Seiji he had a bad habit of spending money as soon as he got it and needed someone trustworthy to hold on to it. Seiji wasn't fully on board, but when Shigeru insisted he couldn't manage money, Seikka volunteered to handle it for him. Seiji doubted it was wise to let someone as reckless and impulsive as Seikka manage such a sum, but Shigeru let her take it. It would help settle his debt to her when he left the group. Not long after, Seikka dragged Seiji to a burger joint to treat him to something tasty. Shigeru figured this would be their last meal together, as he could now leave guilt-free. Seikka returned with 2 happy meals, and Shigeru asked if she really loved burgers that much. She admitted she'd had her first burger just 2 days ago and fell in love instantly. Shigeru was stunned she'd never eaten one in the real world. As they ate, Seikka asked about his stats. Shigeru said it was boring, and she pointed out that lowering his appearance stats gave him extra points elsewhere. Shigeru was shocked she discovered this too and asked if she'd also reduced hers. She revealed she'd dropped hers to -16, and Shigeru couldn't believe it. She looked too beautiful for that. Seikka proudly explained she'd used a special note feature on the welcome screen to wish for beauty, somehow overriding her low appearance stat. Shigeru had the biggest shock of his life realizing he could have done the same and been handsome. But it was too late now. Just then, Seikka spotted a cat and excitedly said she'd never seen one up close. She wondered how to get it to come closer. When Shigeru told her to just go pet it, she gave him a judgmental look, then realized his suggestion made sense and admitted she'd forgotten she could walk now. She awkwardly ran toward the cat, and Shigeru understood her situation. As she tried petting it, Shigeru slipped away to the bathroom and cried, realizing how hard Seikka's life must have been. In the real world, she likely suffered from a condition that left her paralyzed from a young age. He pitied her and wondered if there was no God, then remembered he was the almighty God in this world. Even if he couldn't change reality, he could help her in other ways. Seikka knocked on the door, asking if he needed medicine. Shigeru said he was fine. As he composed himself, he realized Seikka's awkwardness with her body and naive interactions stemmed from her past, making her an easy target for criminals. So, he decided to stay and protect her until she became a fully capable adult. Later, at the inn, Seiji held a meeting to assign job classes for a more dynamic team. He declared himself the hero, Seikka the archer, the blonde girl the mage, and Shigeru the epic fighter. Shigeru hated the unnecessary adjective in his class name. Seikka suddenly spoke up, saying she also wanted to be a hero. But when Shigeru suggested she take the epic fighter role instead, she immediately refused. In the end, Seiji remained the sole hero. Seikka became the mage, the blonde girl chose hunter, and Shigeru kept his class. After buying new gear, Seiji decided to move to the region's largest city, but first, he set a snack budget, accounting for Seikka's spending habits. The meeting ended, but Seikka stayed to talk to the blonde girl, her first friend here. Nervous, she hesitated until Shigeru silently wished her luck. Finally, she mustered the courage to ask her to play jump rope, saying she'd been practicing. The blonde girl agreed, and both went to change clothes. Meanwhile, Shigeru recalled how things had led here. Earlier, while shopping with Seikka, she'd wanted to buy a cool-looking weapon, but Shigeru stopped her, saying only epic fighters use such dangerous items. She fixated on nunchucks, but thanks to an unexpected collaboration between Shigeru and the shopkeeper, she settled for a jump rope instead. After leaving, Shigeru taught her how to use it, and she learned quickly. Yet, her mind soon drifted to the blonde girl and how she wanted to befriend her despite not knowing her name. Shigeru suggested ways to approach her, leading to the present moment, where he spied on the two girls playing. The blonde girl quickly picked up jump rope from Seikka. But when the topic of names came up, she froze. Seikka realized she didn't want to share hers and mentioned how Shigeru had once grossed her out, leading them to nickname her Reiya. The blonde girl went silent at this, then resumed jumping, launching incredibly high at the end. The crowd went wild, swarming her with recruitment offers. Seikka tried to approach but was ignored, even shoved by a man. She burst into tears, forcing Shigeru to step in. People panicked at his appearance, calling him a monster. But Reiya, the blonde girl, defended him, saying he was part of their group. She worried about Seikka, explaining she'd only wanted to impress her with the trick. Shigeru muttered that a simple answer would have sufficed. Overwhelmed with guilt, Reiya ran off crying. Shigeru spent the walk back comforting Seikka. But as he entered his room, he found a letter from Reiya apologizing and thanking her for the nickname. Seikka rushed out to find her, but Shigeru had already spotted Reiya hiding nearby. He called her out, and she asked to speak privately. Warning her not to blame him later, he let her in, where she knelt and bowed in apology. Confused, Shigeru asked why she was apologizing to him. Then Reiya revealed she knew his full name, and that he was the salesman Seiji had spoken of. Shigeru was shocked, but he kept up his act, asking Reiya why he thought that. He revealed that he had chosen the special ability to read other people's status windows and could see their real names, stats, and the things they wrote in their special notes. Shigeru panicked, realizing that Reiya had read his notes, which made him look like a frustrated incel, and he covered his face while asking what Reiya wanted. Reiya told him it was about Seikka and asked if Shigeru had noticed that his body was paralyzed in his previous life. Shigeru confirmed it, and then Reiya suddenly revealed that he was the one who had ruined Seikka in their past life and that he was here to atone for his sins. Shigeru, curious, asked what he had done to Seikka. Reiya explained that in their past life, he was part of a program aimed at changing people's lives. Seikka was one of the children they helped, and he genuinely wanted her to live a better life. However, one day, an explosion occurred in their building, and Seikka was severely injured because of it. Reiya cried as he admitted that he had failed to prevent the accident and save Seikka. He regretted the incident, which happened due to misunderstandings among the people working there, and to avoid such things in the future, he wrote in his special note that he wanted to understand others better. Shigeru understood that this was why Reiya had gained the ability to see people's statuses. He asked about the program Reiya had been part of, and Reiya told him it was related to artificial intelligence. The story immediately reminded Shigeru that Seiji's company had gone bankrupt due to a failed AI program caused by an explosion, and he asked if Rizu was referring to that. Rizu confirmed it, revealing that he was actually Seiji's older brother, but he had completely changed his behavior and personality in this world, so Seiji wouldn't recognize him. Shigeru was still skeptical, but Rizu told him that he couldn't lie because that was the price for obtaining his special ability. He felt that their arrival in this world together wasn't a coincidence and that their fates had been connected in their past lives. He knew that Shigeru was trying to make Seikka happy and guide Seiji to become a better adventurer, and he asked to help Shigeru with that. Shigeru admitted that both Seiji and Seikka were too naive and needed his support to stay safe in this world. He agreed to work with Rizu, who then suddenly cut his hair short to show his determination, just like Sakura. Shigeru was confused, seeing no point in doing that, but Rizu told him that Seikka had said he looked good with short hair. Regardless, they officially formed a pact to help their two other friends. The next morning, they prepared to leave for the capital city, and Shigeru arranged for a strange turtle-goat hybrid creature to carry their luggage. Rizu was the last to arrive and was moved to tears when Seikka told him he looked good with short hair. They set off on their journey and soon encountered a group of monsters. Seikka defeated one with ice magic, and when another attacked her, Seiji shielded her while Rizu covered their backs. They quickly dealt with the monsters, and Seikka proudly showed off her skills as a mage to Shigeru, who could only nod in approval. As the sun began to set, Seiji suggested they find a place to set up camp, and everyone agreed. They headed toward the city of Valyria, but since Seikka wanted an adventure, they chose to hike through mountains filled with dangerous monsters and no inns to stay in. Fortunately, they found a hollowed-out tree trunk where they could rest for the night, and Seikka was thrilled. Seiji asked if she wanted to gather firewood or go fishing, and Seikka confidently declared she would catch the biggest fish in the river, only to clumsily hook her own robe first. Shigeru freed her and then took her fishing, but they could only wait for a bite. Seikka suddenly began talking about how she was too emotional and wanted to become more mature and composed. Shigeru told her that wasn't necessary, crying wasn't a bad thing. He explained that people don't just cry when they're sad but also when their hearts are overwhelmed with emotions they can't control. He recalled his past, saying that people gradually lose the ability to cry, and that stops them from growing stronger. He advised Seikka that instead of learning not to cry, she should learn to understand what moved her heart. Touched by his words, Seikka burst into tears. Just then, Rizu arrived and, seeing they hadn't caught anything, effortlessly shot a few fish in the river and handed them to Seikka. She excitedly ran back to camp to give them to Seiji. Meanwhile, Rizu remarked that Seikka always looked happy around Shigeru. He believed Shigeru was someone who could easily make others smile and that the group would be much safer with him around. Shigeru blushed but then decided to head back. Rizu stopped him, asking him not to reveal his true identity to anyone, as it could split the group apart, and Shigeru agreed. Back at camp, Seiji and Seikka had already started cooking. As they sat down to eat, Seikka mimicked Rizu's mannerisms while Shigeru asked Seiji what he thought about the ultimate goal of their journey. Seiji grew serious and replied that they didn't have a final destination yet, reaching Valyria was their immediate goal. He planned to learn more about this world and its problems to determine what they needed to do. Shigeru was impressed by his logical thinking when suddenly, they heard rustling from the bushes. A severely injured and exhausted woman stumbled out of the forest and collapsed as soon as the group noticed her. In her dreams, the woman recalled escaping from some bandits earlier. Despite being a reincarnated person in this world, she couldn't fight them and blamed her special note for it. In her past life, she had been unattractive, and her boyfriend left her for a beautiful girl. Everyone in her social circle constantly mocked her, and she grew to hate pretty girls because of it. Her dream ended abruptly, and she found herself in the camp with Seiji tending to her wounds. He told her they had cleaned her injuries and given her first aid. Just then, Seikka arrived with warm water to clean her, and the woman flinched. She despised how beautiful Seikka was. Seiji told her that Seikka had used healing magic on her, but that didn't change the woman's attitude. She grew even more irritated when Seikka tried to talk to her and demanded that Seiji move her closer to the fire. Seikka was upset, but Shigeru wanted her to learn not to invade a stranger's personal space so quickly. Moreover, he wanted Seikka to stay away from the one-armed woman because he knew the truth about her. Earlier, when the woman had fainted, Seiji had asked Shigeru to fetch water. Shigeru rushed to the river, but Rizu stopped him, his expression signaling something was wrong. He revealed that the woman was a reincarnator like them, and her special note was dangerous. She had written that she would never forgive beautiful girls and would brutally kill them. Both of them suspected she was targeting Seikka. Back in the present, Seiji comforted the woman, who introduced herself as Rizu. He asked if she wanted food, and she happily agreed, but when Seikka offered her a bowl, hatred welled up inside her. Rizu tried to grab her weapon, but fortunately, Reiya had already taken it, and he kept a close watch on her. Shigeru also kept an eye on Rizu, ready to stop her if she tried anything. Seiji asked Rizu how she got hurt, and she claimed that some people had ambushed her group, separating her from her friends. Shigeru wondered how true that story was, but Seiji trusted her and offered to protect her until they reached Valyria. Rizu gladly accepted, but when Seikka told her to trust their group leader, she grew angry again, aggravating her injured arm. Seiji urged her to calm down, but Rizu insisted she needed to go to the river. She asked Seikka to take her there, but Seiji said he would do it instead. Rizu then claimed she planned to bathe and accused Seiji of being perverted if he wanted to peek. Seiji blushed, and Seikka innocently asked if he was a pervert, emotionally crushing him. As Shigeru stood to comfort him, Rizu warned that if he came within 10 feet, she'd scream. Shigeru backed off, and Reiya offered to take her instead, but since he couldn't lie, he also couldn't hide his true intentions. Shigeru wished he'd at least concealed his murderous intent because it frightened Rizu, who now insisted that Seikka take her. Seikka didn't mind and even returned Rizu's weapon in case they were attacked by monsters. Shigeru panicked. This put Seikka in even greater danger, but Reiya followed them to keep her safe. Shigeru also tried to follow, but Seiji stopped him, saying they should respect women's privacy. Shigeru argued that Rizu was dangerous, but Seiji just joked that the charm of mature women was indeed perilous. Frustrated, Shigeru couldn't leave without raising suspicion, so he began flickering between two locations at lightning speed to keep watch. Seikka was stunned when she saw him appear blurry, but Shigeru told her she must be tired and seeing things. He urged her to rest and then cast a sleep spell on her, knocking her out instantly. He then rushed to the river bank, where Rizu suddenly pointed her sword at Seikka. Seikka, shocked, asked if she had done something wrong. Rizu told her she hadn't, she was a good girl, but she couldn't go against what was written in her special note. She admitted she had sworn to kill all beautiful girls because they had ruined her life on Earth. She had joined various adventurer groups, murdered pretty girls, and then fled to the next, but now they were hunting her. She told Seikka it was her turn to die today. But just as she was about to strike, Reiya shot the sword out of her hand. He pushed Rizu back, and as she tried to grab her weapon, Shigeru seized her arm. He told her she couldn't escape now and drew his own sword. Suddenly, a blinding light engulfed them all. They wondered what was happening, and when they looked toward the source, they saw the light was coming from Seikka, who had transformed into a true angel. Shigeru was shocked to see that after Seiji, there was another member of their group who could transform. Seikka began floating toward Rizu, telling her that there was no need to suffer anymore. On the other hand, Rizu threatened her to stay away if she didn't want to die. However, Rizu's severed arm began to ache terribly, and she collapsed to the ground. Seikka asked if she wanted to hurt others, and Rizu replied that she didn't, but she couldn't overcome what had been written in her special notebook. Shigeru also pitied the poor girl who had become the female version of Jeffrey Dahmer because of her special notebook. But Seikka believed there must be a way to change things. She floated closer to Rizu, who swatted her hand away. Yet, Seikka then prayed for her suffering to end. Suddenly, an explosion of light burst from her hand, and Rizu's severed arm instantly regenerated. She became sentimental upon seeing her arm restored. Shigeru was stunned because, even as the Almighty God, he couldn't perform miracles like this. Seikka suddenly revealed that she had written in her special notebook that if her friends ever suffered, she wanted to become an angel to heal them and help them recover what they had lost. Rizu began to cry upon realizing that Seikka considered her a friend. Then Seikka started talking about her past life. She said she had horrific scars on her face and had even lost one of her eyes, and she didn't want anyone else to experience the same. She believed she couldn't heal the emotional damage Rizu had endured, but she said that together, they could find a way to heal that too. However, Rizu told her to stay away, calling her ugly. She suddenly realized the solution to her situation and told Seikka that her crying face looked ugly, so she was no longer her target. She ran off after saying that, leaving Seikka confused and hurt. Reiya decided to chase after Rizu to see what she would do. Then, Seikka suddenly reverted to her normal form and fainted. Fortunately, Shigeru was there to catch her. Meanwhile, Rizu found a secluded spot and carved something into a tree before pointing her sword at her own face. However, Shigeru arrived just in time and knocked the sword from her hand. Reiya had informed him that Rizu was trying to blind herself so her special notebook would no longer work. Rizu asked if he had come to kill her, but Shigeru said he hadn't sunk that low. He told Rizu that if she injured her eyes, Seikka would be sad, but he understood her reasoning well. So, he offered a deal where Rizu would only lose her sight without losing her eyes. Rizu asked how he could do that, and Shigeru demonstrated the ultimate dark element skill called the Five-Finger Underworld Seal, which could seal one of her 5 senses while making her stronger in return. She asked who Shigeru really was to possess such a powerful spell, and Shigeru replied that he was just a businessman who had run out of food. He explained that this spell was the best he could offer. It would blind Rizu without damaging her eyes. He also said the spell would last until countered by a powerful light element spell, so it likely wouldn't be undone anytime soon. Rizu asked why he was willing to go this far for Seikka, and her most obvious guess was that Seikka was beautiful. Shigeru said he wasn't that shallow and revealed that he had messed up his own special notebook a bit. He admitted that at first, he couldn't trust anyone, not even his own group. But Seikka had been kind to him despite his rough appearance, so he was just repaying his debt to her. Rizu replied that it must be nice to be in a good group, and Shigeru offered for her to join them, saying Seiji would accept her once he heard her circumstances. She refused, saying she had sinned too much and now wanted to carve her own path. However, she accepted the deal to blind herself, and Shigeru quickly cast the spell on her. Later, he returned to Seikka, who had finally regained consciousness. She marveled at how her power had regenerated Rizu's arm and was excited at the thought of helping many people now. However, Shigeru warned that they had to keep her power a secret because it was too valuable. Seikka didn't understand why, so he explained that thieves steal valuable things in stories, and her ability fell into that category. Seikka was a little saddened by this, and then Shigeru reinforced his story by saying Rizu had tried to kill her because she was beautiful. He told Seikka she had to protect herself from such evil people, and Seikka asked what she should do. He advised her not to distrust everyone but to observe their behavior and determine if they were friends or foes. Seikka grew excited hearing this, and Shigeru added that if she ever encountered someone dangerous despite being careful, she should call for him loudly, and he would come to her aid immediately. He assured her that it was okay to fail once or twice because he would support her, and she became emotional upon hearing that. She then extended her hand to seal their deal with a handshake. Though he knew he would suffer immense pain, Shigeru took her hand. The agony was overwhelming, but he strained with all his might not to crush Seikka's hand. The next day, Shigeru told Seiji that Rizu had left during the night and had also left a message for Seikka. He led the whole group to the tree where Rizu had carved her message. In it, she thanked Seikka for healing her physical and emotional wounds and promised to help her if they ever met again. Seikka became emotional reading it, and Seiji felt they should have at least seen her off. But Shigeru said Rizu had left happily and was determined to find her own path. Afterward, they continued their journey to the city of Valyria. While Seiji and Seikka excitedly chatted about visiting a new place, Reiya recalled the conversation he'd had with Shigeru the previous night. Shigeru had explained how he took Rizu's sight to prevent her from attacking girls again. Reiya was shocked, even more so by Seikka's transformation, since her special notebook hadn't mentioned anything like that. Meanwhile, Seiji's notebook had an embarrassingly detailed explanation of his transformation process, and just remembering it made Reiya shudder. Shigeru had demanded a full written report because he wanted to determine if Seiji had any weaknesses that could become problematic in the future. Reiya was horrified by the task but accepted it. Shigeru told him to take it easy since he only needed the weaknesses when Seiji made his decision. He reminded Reiya of when Seiji had said he wanted to see the world before deciding on their journey's goal. And Shigeru had an idea for the best goal. He believed Seiji should become king. From what the swindler Kyushiru had said, even someone from another world could become king here. Shigeru told Reiya that Seikka was naive and knew nothing of the real world, but Seiji understood its dark side while still maintaining a pure heart. He believed having Seiji rule a kingdom would greatly help people like Seikka. Reiya suggested Shigeru could do it instead, but Shigeru dismissed the idea. With his declining income, his country would be the poorest, and he wasn't fit to lead. Seiji, however, had the charisma to make people follow him and could lead them well in any situation. Back in the present, Shigeru and Reiya were a team with a separate goal from the other two. For now, they wanted Seiji and Seikka to level up as much as possible, which wouldn't be hard since a massive horde of monsters lay ahead. Seiji announced they would break through the horde and reach the city gates. But as they started running, he suddenly stopped, saying he needed to tie his shoelaces, even though his shoes had as many laces as the number of zeros in his bank account. Seikka trusted him and ran ahead. Shigeru followed and used a wind barrier to protect her from colliding with monsters, then looked back to see Seiji screaming like Goku to transform into his Super Saiyan angel form. Shigeru thought the shoelace act was unnecessary, until he remembered Seiji's clothes tore every time he transformed, and those weren't cheap. Luckily, Seiji remembered too. So, he took off his expensive outfit, folded it neatly, and then started his screaming routine from the beginning. Meanwhile, Shigeru devised a plan to help Seikka level up as well. He quickly found some ruins where they could take shelter, but monsters began climbing the walls. Reiya suggested hitting them to drive them away, and Seikka followed his advice. Shigeru blessed them with almighty god buffs to make the fight easier. He then decided to prolong the battle as long as possible without killing any monsters, so he summoned mud golems to keep them occupied safely. Shigeru turned to check on Seiji, only to find him still screaming, needing anger to transform but having none at the moment. Suddenly, Seiji recalled when an apprentice had stepped on his shoe and channeled that rage to transform without tearing his clothes. He then ran down the hill, and Shigeru wondered what the point of his wings was. Seiji climbed the ruins where the rest of the group was, and Reiya already cringed at his embarrassing antics. Seiji introduced himself as the wandering adventurer hero Aldine and then jumped down, defeating monsters with his special moves. Seikka was deeply impressed, but Reiya fought the urge to vomit at the cringeworthy display. Seiji continued fighting small monsters, but when facing a giant stone golem, he deactivated his power to gather aura for a later attack, flying around and using other moves. With that, he wiped out all the monsters and then vanished before reverting to his normal form. Seikka didn't suspect that Seiji was Aldine and gushed about how cool the hero was. Seiji was delighted and wanted others to praise him too. Now, Shigeru wondered if making this narcissistic idiot king was really such a good idea.